hello, everyone. I'm Sudeep Charles, and I head product marketing for Chef Desktop. With me today are Nishchal Reddy, who heads product management for this product, and also Chaitra, who is a product manager for this product, right? So a bunch of us will try and take you through a few things over the next hour. And what we'll do is we'll cover an overview of how you can manage your IT resources um, and through automation and do it at scale, right? We'll see how this paradigm can be orchestrated with Chef Desktop, and what are the benefits you can derive, using this approach, right? So with that said, let's get right to it. Now, this is a survey that was conducted by the World Economic Forum, and this is about the future of work. But it tells us a little bit about challenges in just getting IT automation up and running, right? So more than 40% basically highlighted that the challenge to managing IT infrastructure centrally is in terms of just the mobility of the workforce, right? The challenge is just becoming more acute. Being in multiple locations at the same time is simply impossible for smaller IT teams, and that seems to come out here very, very clearly. The second biggest challenge, of course, amongst the respondents, I think nearly 50% of the users highlighted this, was doing work without impacting users, right? And if you will, right, this is akin to trying to perform a complex surgery without waking the patient, right? It's not while the patient is still awake, and that's not something that you want to do, right? Impact your workforce as they're working, and then try and manage their infrastructure as well. 40% of respondents said that the challenge was something in terms of keeping the infra moving smoothly, right? This brings to mind the constant double-edged sword that all IT professionals are up against. On the one side, you have to be proactive, you've got to plan ahead, and also on the other side, you've got to be really tactical and react on day-to-day challenges that are posed to you. And of course, this is universal, but more so in the world of IT, is that there is really 55% nearly saying that there's a lack of time. Finding time to do anything meaningful when all of this is happening and one has to react to all of this is nearly impossible, right? So this is something that the World Economic Forum is telling us in terms of what the surveys have been. I won't go through all of these numbers, but essentially, why automate IT infra? Broadly, 3 points to it, right? One, it helps free up bandwidth, and this is across teams, both on both on the infra teams as well as on IT teams. It helps free up time for you to do more strategic work, be that what it may in terms of what your end results are. And three, it helps your workforce be more mindful and productive, right? You're doing things more. There is a certain direction in which you're going, and it helps your teams really stop, think, and adopt those processes as opposed to being reactive. So essentially, all of this gives you, at least automation gives you, the ability to be more productive across teams. Now, why automate IT infrastructure, right? I'm not going to preach to the choir, but essentially just say this. Infrastructure automation uses software to create repeatable instructions and processes to replace or even reduce human interaction with IT systems. And automation software works within the confines of those instructions and tools and frameworks, right, to perform tasks that don't really need a lot of human intervention. And there are a bunch of examples in terms of where IT automation can actually be introduced. This could be managing networks, administering your storage and data, deploying applications, or even managing the physical infrastructure of your workforce. Something like your workforce's desktop or laptops, right? You could potentially automate the configuration of user access management to troubleshoot and debug end user issues and automate those processes. You could get the inventory management done and automate that as well. Just get a sense of, what are your assets like? Where are they at this point? What is their current state? Is there any deviation to the desired state vis-a-vis the state that those endpoints or those laptops or desktops are currently in? All of this can be automated, right? So enough incentive in terms of why you would need to automate your IT infra. All this is great, but how can Chef help, right? And IT admins typically use MDMs for performing core tasks like wiping or locking up or device enrollments, provisioning zero touch in devices, and so on and so forth, right? There are a bunch of examples that we're all very familiar with. Now, once you use an MDM to have a Chef client installed on your desktop or laptop, that's when the magic happens. IT admins, would then easily upload configuration settings, any compliance and remediation content that you might have in mind in the form of Chef or Chef desktop cookbooks, right? And then once these endpoints manage to pull out those configurations, you're able to then apply those configurations to those endpoints. All of those compliance profiles are monitored based on the current CIS standards, if you're using CIS profiles. And there is, of course, continuous visibility that is maintained to the proper functioning of your infra across the entire fleet, right? So it does this at scale. Now, with that said, there are a bunch of benefits. And again, broadly, it comes down to helping increase productivity, increase responsiveness, be more agile. It helps you be more compliant and give you visibility to that compliance, and essentially streamline your operations and development across the board, right? So those are the broad benefits that you might derive from automating infra and doing it at scale. But how do you do that in some more detail? To cover all of that, we'll have Nishal Reddy walk you through some of that detail. But before we do, there are a few poll questions that will pop up on your screen through this webinar. The first one is coming up right now. Do take the time, to respond to those questions, and we'll discuss those answers, towards the end of that webinar. With that, I'll hand it off to Nishal.
Thank you, Sudeep. So you must have got a poll on your screen. We would highly recommend you to respond to that. All right, let me start by, let's first start by looking at the endpoint management landscape. We have tools that are specialized to manage configurations of the endpoints, tools like unified endpoint management tools or mobile device management tools, so on and so forth. And then we also have specialized patch management tools that help in deploying OS and third-party patches. And on the other side, we also have security tools to monitor, detect, and alert any threats or non-compliance. And endpoint management tools sit at the intersection of all these tools and play a key role in ensuring that employees not only have everything that they need to be productive, but also ensure that the devices are secure and have all the security software installed and well configured. And this is more so relevant in recent times where most of the workforce is remote and threat surface has increased multifold. And this has introduced few challenges. So let's look at what those challenges are. So the first and foremost challenge is we have too many tools, which has kind of introduced like a sprawl of tool chain. And these tools have different workflow processes and learning curve. And depending on the combination of tools, they might not even be very well integrated with each other. Apart from this, some of the endpoint management tools work only inside company's network, which has made it really hard to manage the devices that are remote. So IT teams rely on employees connecting to the network to manage those machines via VPN. And then the state of configurations of the devices is riddled inside the UI, which makes it very error prone and time consuming. So, and also inefficient to manage these devices. So when you have a lot of state of your endpoints on inside different menu and drop down options, configuring it will become much more manual, and there is always scope of errors as well. And compliance is also key, and it is again more relevant in the current times. IT teams have to rely on host of different tools to ensure that the devices are compliant, and then they have to spend enormous amounts of time to prove the compliance as well. And another biggest problem is scale. So managing the devices at scale is a biggest challenge, and scale brings in totally different set of challenges as well. So the first and foremost is if you end up using traditional endpoint management solutions, like I said, you have to mostly set these configurations in some kind of user interface, and the number of options that you have in user interface and the number of places that you have to go and edit these configuration changes is huge. And this becomes a bigger, much more bigger challenge if you're managing a huge fleet of devices. So let's say if you have tens of thousands of machines, you might end up having like hundreds of sub functions and groups and teams who need very specific and fine-grained access and configuration controls, right? So setting that using UI could become very cumbersome, and you could start hitting the limits pretty soon. And then the next is having fine-grained control over the devices itself, which I've briefly touched upon. For example, let's say you are an organization with thousands of employees working, right? And then you have many sub-functions like finance, and then you have development teams, you have marketing teams, and even within the development teams, you have multiple sub-teams like a .NET developer, and then you have maybe backend developers who mostly interact with database. So each set of groups might typically need different levels of access, different configuration settings, different applications, so on and so forth, right? So having a fine grain of control when you're dealing with the scale of devices is pretty crucial as well. And finally, and the next thing is handling configuration drifts. So most of the traditional management tools can help you provide options to configure certain settings on your fleet or end user devices. But what happens if that device goes out of configuration? What if drifts from the desired state? What happens then is pretty abstract, and it is not well handled. So this is also pretty crucial when you're dealing with devices at scale, because you can't expect end users to keep proactively create tickets and your IT team to go and solve that. It's just too overwhelming to handle so many tickets when you specifically are dealing with a lot of devices in your fleet. And next is managing multiple operating systems. This is like a pretty common problem that most of system administrators managing a huge number of devices face. So in any typical organization, we see that they have predominant OS is Windows. Depending on the kind of organization, it could also be Mac. But every organization has some split between Windows and Mac machines. And to manage these machines, most of the organizations have two different tools. We also came across few organizations who use unified endpoint management tools to manage different OSs using a single tool. But the most common practice is you have a tool for managing your Windows laptops, and then you have another tool for managing your Mac machines. And most of the times, though you have the Linux machines, you don't use any tool to manage them. Right now, managing these multiple operating systems using different tools is in itself added overhead, because you need to follow different processes, you need to have it has a different learning curve, and the whole it's not very seamless, right? And shifting from one tool to the other is also you have to do a lot of context switching. The way you fetch a report in one tool is different from how you do it on the other, right? And then monitoring compliance, and then once a device goes out of compliant state, how do you bring it back to again compliant state is again a problem, right? So monitoring compliance and remediating non-compliant devices is a big problem. Currently it's done by integrating with host of other tools. You have vulnerability scanning tools, you have compliance scanning tools, and then we also observe that IT teams typically do remediation manually. So once a device goes out of compliance, they go check their compliance reports. If they find any device that is not compliant, they would typically try to remediate using endpoint management tool, or they would probably ping the user and do a screen sharing session to quickly fix it, right? So it's mostly manual. And doing this manual remediation is also a big overhead, specifically when you're dealing with thousands of end user machines. And finally, because of these reasons, IT teams are overburdened as the fleet scales rapidly. And this is where adding a layer of automation can help your teams become more productive, and can also bring a standardized process across different operating systems and different workflows like compliance, remediation, and management. And finally, if you automate most of the manual and menial workflows and processes, you can avoid a lot of human errors that would otherwise happen. And this is where Chef can fit in, and Chef can act as an automation layer on top of your existing endpoint management tools. Chef has we have launched a product called Chef Desktop early last year, which is specifically built for solving the problems that we have just discussed. So now let's look at what it means to use Chef alongside or on top of your existing endpoint management tools, right? So let's first start with this high-level overview diagram, where on the top you have different endpoints like Mac, Windows, Linux, and at the bottom you have MDM. I'm just loosely using the term MDM here, but you can replace it with an unified endpoint management tool or any other tool that you use in your organization, right? So and you typically the most common and reason that people would have MDMs is to manage different MDMs or UMCs to manage different configuration settings on these endpoints. And importantly, this is also used for initial enrollment, provisioning laptop in a zero-touch enrollment way, and then also to remotely wipe or lock devices if the device is lost or if you think it is compromised, and also to deploy other applications and software, right? So you can still continue to use your existing tools for those workflows, which is initial enrollment, bootstrapping, and stuff, right? You can continue to use that. You can also use your existing tools to do remote, wiping and locking and so on and so forth. But you can also use either UEM or MDM tools to deploy Chef client onto your endpoints. It's pretty simple. You can deploy it as a script, or you can also deploy it as any other workflow through which you deploy any custom applications. And once that Chef client is installed on your endpoint, Chef can start taking over the configuration management. It can automatically do drift correction, and it can also do compliance monitoring and auto remediation as well. So you can continue to use MDM for some of the critical workflows like enrollment and stuff, and then you can delegate all the other management and compliance workflows to Chef Desktop or Chef. And in fact, let me take a step back and give you a little bit of overview on what Chef has been doing so far. So Chef has been forefront in the DevOps side, and then Chef has infra management. It has been doing automating infra config management from a long time, so where you can represent your infrastructure management in code, and then Chef will be able to bring the infrastructure to the state that you desire it to be in. So Chef has actually been doing this from a very long time, from more than a decade, and it's very natural for us to actually apply the same principles for managing endpoints as well. In fact, if you are already aware about, if you already have experience using Chef for managing your server infrastructure, you can actually leverage the same skill set, same processes and workflows to apply it for managing your endpoint fleet as well. So the skills are very transferable. So just moving ahead. So once you deploy Chef client onto your endpoints, now if you want to manage any specific setting, or if you want to deploy any specific compliance profiles, or if you want to ensure that your endpoints adhere to any compliance standard, you don't have to go and set all these settings in UI manually. You can actually represent the state of your endpoints in code through something called as Cookbooks. This, when I say code, you don't have to actually go and write a lot of code from scratch. So we provide a lot of abstractions that are ready to be reused, and it is supported by Ruby DSL. So you can actually, if you have Ruby experience, you can totally go deep into it, or if you don't have, you don't have to worry about it. We provide a DSL layer that you can easily consume without much Ruby knowledge as well. So now, instead of setting these configuration settings through UI, you would represent that in code through something called Cookbooks. And then the typical workflow that we've seen our customers do is they try to apply the standard DevOps practices. Because of that, you would get a lot of benefits out of it, which I'll cover in a moment. But what you would do is, once you represent the state of your fleet in code through Cookbooks, you would first commit that code onto a source code management tool, either GitHub or any other source code management tools, which would trigger some kind of a CI/CD process. And in the CI/CD process, you can actually not only represent the state of your fleet in code, but you can also write tests on top of them. So before they are deployed, all those tests will be run. If all the tests are passed, only then it will be promoted to the next stage. So ideally, once the tests are all the tests are passed, it will first move all the changes to a staging environment if you have any, and then you can either manually go and test all the changes in a staging environment, or you can also automate that part of promoting it to production. So once all the tests are passed and you're fine with all the changes in the staging environment, you can promote it to a production Chef Infra server. So all the cookbooks will be pushed to Chef Infra server, and the endpoints will periodically keep pinging the Chef Infra server to see if there are any new changes. If there are any, they'll pull all those configurations onto the machine, and they will apply those changes onto that endpoint. Similarly, you can follow the exact same workflow and process for applying compliance controls as well. Let's say, for example, your organization want to apply a CIS benchmark. You want to make sure that all the endpoints adhere to CIS benchmarks. We provide CIS benchmarks out of the box. You can use them, and you can deploy CIS benchmark profile onto your endpoints. And Chef client will continuously monitor the state of your endpoint to ensure it meets that standard. If it doesn't, it will report it back to a dashboard, and you can go and check the compliance posture of your fleet. But on top of it, you can also automate the remediation. For example, let's say you want to ensure that the antivirus software has certain configuration set on your endpoints, and for some reason that configuration is corrupted, right? So if you have a compliance control defined to monitor that, if that control fails, you can actually write a cookbook to correct that configuration back to the desired state. So even the remediation can be automated completely. And in this way, now you can delegate the initial bootstrapping and enrollment process to your existing tools, and then the rest of the things can be done by Chef. It can be used as an automation layer that would do all the configuration workflows. It can also ensure that it will monitor the compliance state of your fleet. It will also do any correction in the drift. For example, let's say one of the Mac machines in the fleet have drifted from a desired state. So for example, let's take the same example of antivirus software. It needs certain settings to be configured, and for some reason maybe user has manually changed it, or it has corrupted those settings. Then the next time Chef client runs, Chef client can run periodically. The default is every 30 minutes, but it can be configured to any time interval. So the next time Chef client runs, it will check for the compliance state of that endpoint. If it is not compliant, then it will try to if it's not having the right settings, then it will try to run the same cookbook again to bring it back to the desired state. So it can automatically do the drift correction as well. And Chef can also be used to orchestrate OS updates and application management and so on and so forth. And we also have a dashboard. Chaitra would be walking you through the different dashboards that we have, and with a small example. But we also have a dashboard where you can get visibility of your whole fleet. That dashboard will not only provide visibility into the state of your fleet in terms of the configurations that you have applied, but you can also get the whole compliance posture of that fleet as well, as in how many machines are compliant, how many machines have checked in the last 24 hours, and how many of them are compliant, how many of them are not compliant, and also the reasons why they are not compliant. And you can actually go and pinpoint to the exact control that has failed and the reasons why, so that you can either write remediation cookbooks to automatically fix it, or in off cases where you can't, maybe you can go and proactively solve that manually. So with this, I will hand it over to Chaitra to walk you through some of the dashboards that we have with a small example. But before that, you'll start seeing another poll on your screen. I would highly recommend you to respond to that. With that, Chaitra, over to you.
Hey, thanks, Nischal. So I'm going to show you how you can view your endpoint fleet on the desktop dashboard. I'll also be taking you through an example of how you can leverage Chef abstractions to configure your endpoints. So what you see over here is an overview screen where you can see your all the endpoints in your fleet, which are the devices which checked in, which are the devices which did not check in. And you can also see the check-in history over a period of time. You can also filter these endpoints by attributes like platforms, environments, etc. In this example, we have only Windows devices checked in, but if you have like Mac devices or Linux machines on your fleet, that would also be visible here. And when you click on the individual endpoints, it takes you to the detail screen where a bunch of attributes are listed for that particular device, like host name, platform, memory, IP address, etc. So you can also see the check-in history for that particular endpoint, and you can further drill down and view the status of the client run. So if you see in this example, we have a client run which did not complete successfully. So you look at the error log to further analyze the issue. And you can also look at the run history for that particular run, for that particular endpoint, where you can see all the client runs that happened on this node. So here we are seeing a client run which did not successfully go through. But if you look at an example of a client run which was successfully completed, you can see that a list of resources and configurations that were applied on the endpoint are displayed. So by this, you can get to know what are the changes that actually went through your device. And you'll also get to know which are the configurations which successfully completed, which are the configurations which failed. And finally, we have a tab for run list, which shows the cookbooks that were scheduled to run on this endpoint. So by cookbook, we mean cookbook is a chef artifact using which you can configure your endpoints as code. And Chef provides premium content in the form of cookbook, which has some configurations for the most common use cases to manage your endpoints. So let's look at how you can manage your endpoint state as code using cookbooks. Here we have an example of a cookbook called desktop config, and a cookbook can have multiple recipes. A recipe is where you can describe the configurations that you want to apply on your endpoints. So what we see here is a recipe where we have specified the configurations to configure a Windows node. And we can see 4 resources here on this recipe, but let's take up the first one, that is the desktop screensaver resource. And what this resource is doing is it actually sets up the idle time for screensaver on the endpoint to 10 minutes, after which a screensaver would appear and lock the screen, and the user would have to provide a password to log into the system. And this cookbook has to be pushed to the infra server from where the configurations are pulled in the endpoints and the configurations are applied. And you can do this by running some chef commands. And once this cookbook is pushed to the chef server, when the chef client is run on the endpoint, the configurations are pulled from the server and the cookbook is applied on the system. So as a result, you will see that the configurations get updated and the screensaver settings are applied. But what happens when these configurations get updated accidentally, or what if the end user manages to somehow update these configurations? How do you ensure that these devices remain in the desired state? Let's say the screensaver set got updated to 15 minutes from 10 minutes, and now you want to bring back the device to the desired state. What you can do is you can schedule the chef client to run periodically on the endpoints, say every few hours or every few days or whatever frequency you choose. So what happens is, in case there is a configuration that got updated accidentally, the next time the chef client runs, it pulls the original configurations from the chef server and applies again on the endpoint, bringing the device back to the desired state. So in case of configuration drift, chef is automatically able to correct them. And chef is it's not just for representing an endpoint state as code or specifying configurations for your endpoints, but you can also achieve compliance. Chef provides premium content in the form of like CIS and stick benchmark profiles. You can use them to run some compliance checks, or you can also write your compliance profiles validate your compliance. For example, here we have a customized compliance profile written, which checks the screensaver setting. So what is happening here is it fetches the registry entry and it validates whether the screensaver timeout is set to a particular time. So here we are checking whether the screensaver timeout is set to 10 minutes. And if there are any endpoints where the screensaver timeout is not 10 minutes, then the compliance check would fail. Would be able to view this failure on the dashboard. Let me take you through that workflow. So let's just go back to our cookbook and let's say we update the screensaver resource and set the idle time to 15 minutes. And we also have a compliance profile written where we validate whether the screensaver is set to 10 minutes. This compliance profile is pushed to the Chef server, and we also push the updated cookbook to the Chef server. Once these configurations are pulled by the endpoint and the configurations are applied, the compliance check runs and we'll be able to see that failure on compliance dashboard. And we can also further drill down this failed compliance node to see why that compliance check failed. As you can see on the screen, it says that it expected the timeout to be 10 minutes, but the configuration was something else. So with this, we've covered how you view your endpoint fleet on the desktop dashboard, and also how you can use Chef abstractions to configure your endpoints. You have a poll question coming your way. I would request you to provide your answers.
All right. All right. Thank you, Chaitra. You must be seeing a poll on your screen. We would recommend you to respond to that. So with that, I'll just move ahead. I think we are almost towards the last section of this webinar. So in the first section, Sudeep has given a quick overview on why operating at scale matters, and what are some of the challenges that typically organizations face, and what are some of the benefits of solving it through automation. And then I've walked you through how Chef can fit in, and what does it look like for using Chef alongside your existing tools like MDMs or Unified Endpoint Management tools. And Chaitra has quickly walked us through a small example demonstrating some of our product capabilities. So let me just give you a quick overview on what Chef Desktop is, right? Like I said, Chef Desktop was launched early last year. It essentially uses the same components, tools, and technology that is used for managing or automating server config management for a very long time. And we have just taken the same processes and tools to apply the same methodologies for endpoint management space as well. And in fact, even before we formally launched this product, we had really large customers who have been using Chef to manage their endpoints from a very long time, as early as 2015. And they were able to manage tens of thousands of machines with a very small team of like 2-3 IT admins. So they were able to do this because of the way you can represent endpoint state as code and automate most of the manual processes that you would otherwise do, which helped them manage large fleet sizes at scale. So Chef Desktop really helps you, bring efficiency to your existing processes through automation. So since now you can use the exact same processes, not just for managing your endpoints, but also for you're monitoring your continuous compliance, and also automating some of the remediation steps as well. So this will drive productivity and efficiency for your team. And then you can also gain control over your IT resources. So Chef can actually manage multiple operating systems using the same toolchain and processes. So you can manage Windows, Mac, and Linux. In fact, Chef takes it one step further, where most of the abstractions that we provide, these abstractions are called resources, are cross-platform. For example, we have a resource through which you can access file, or there is a resource to create a file, or so on and so forth. So these resources are multi-platform. So when you say, when you use this resource to create a file, you don't have to specify how to create this file in multiple operating systems, like you do it differently in Windows, Mac, and Linux. So you just tell Chef to create a file, and Chef will figure out how to do it on different operating systems. So this will really increase the efficiency of your teams. So now you don't have to end up writing huge scripts with a lot of if-else conditions, or doing it differently in different tools. So you can do it with the same tool chain, with same processes, and same, in fact, it's in the same code block as well. And furthermore, since Chef can manage multiple operating systems, it can act as a control plane and visibility pane across multiple operating systems. Right now, you can have a single tool through which you can get status of your fleet, and also compliance posture as well. And finally, it will reduce the security risk, and as well as will also provide a good compliance tool to continuously monitor the state of your fleet, as well as quickly remediate any issues if it finds any. So yeah, so I think I've briefly covered it. So through it drives the efficiency through automation. So now, instead of setting all the configurations and settings via UI, you can automate it via code. And we also provide, so you don't have to write a lot of code from scratch. Like I said, Chef comes with a lot of abstractions out of the box. We call these abstractions as resources. And we also have a premium content to address most of the common use cases, like setting screensavers or disk encryption, setting password policy, so on and so forth. So you can actually take this premium content and start configuring your machines out of the box. And like I said, you can manage a company-wide fleet regardless of the OS. You can use the same tool, process, and workflows to manage Windows, Mac, and Linux. And Chef has drift correction built in. So if any of the nodes drifts from the desired state, the next time Chef client runs, it will try to bring it back to the desired state again. And like I said, you can also gain control and visibility. So you can use Chef as a single pane of glass that will give visibility into your fleet across operating systems. You can not only find how many devices have checked in the last time, but you can also drill into any errors that have happened while checking in. And you can also use the same dashboard to get compliance posture of your whole fleet as well. And finally, you can also enforce compliance. You can use Chef to continuously monitor the compliance state of your whole fleet. And we provide a lot of, both CIS and strict benchmarks out of the box. So you can either pick these and start enforcing these benchmarks on your fleet, or you can even customize any of the existing profiles or write your own. So if you have any specific compliance requirements that are given by your compliance team, you can actually create custom compliance profiles to handle these use cases as well. So finally, why should someone manage their desktop and laptop fleet with Chef, right? So with Chef, you'll be able to create an automation layer on top of your existing tools, with which you can do more with less number of resources, right? So like I said, we've seen some of our customers who were able to manage like thousands and tens of thousands of machines with a very small team, because now they don't have to be reactive, or they don't have to go and fix the problems manually. So they'll be able to automate most of those tasks, and which has made them more efficient to be able to manage huge scale of fleet. And then, like I said, since you can automate most of things, you'll have less mistakes and less tickets, and your team can concentrate on doing more projects rather than trying to firefight any issues that happen every day. And yeah, you can also use Chef for continuous compliance to proactively monitor the state of your fleet. And you can either use the compliance profiles that are shipped out of the box, or you can write your own. And you can also write remediation cookbooks. We provide remediation content for few profiles out of the box. Or if you want to write any custom remediation content, you can also create that. So you can automatically fix any problems that occur. And every change that is made, right from the moment you represent the state of the fleet in code, to making any changes to the endpoints. Everything is tracked end to end, so you get complete auditability right from the moment someone makes the change to the change getting affected on the device. So with this, I'm almost towards the end of this webinar. I think we are up for taking questions at this point. So if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the question section, and we will take them up. Sudeep, do you have any questions at this point?
We do actually. So let's start, right? And while we answer them, please do feel free to add questions that you might have as well. The first one asks, do I need to know any scripting or any particular programming language to be able to use Chef?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'd say you need to have a basic understanding of some programming language, be it Bash, Shell, or JavaScript, or some understanding of basic constructs of any programming language, and you should be able to pick Chef up, right? So like I said, though Chef uses Ruby underneath it, but we have created a Ruby DSL on top of it with a lot of abstractions that you can use off the bat. So some basic understanding of some programming language with some Ruby fundamentals should be sufficient for you to get started.
Sure. The next one is, if different teams have different configuration needs, is it possible to address them with Chef?
Of course, yeah. So with Chef, you'll be able to, you'll have this fine grain control into what kind of configurations, what type of applications each specific function, group, or team gets. So you can even cascade, different settings that will be applied to different functions. For example, you can do that using something called policies. So you can have a common policy for all employees, where it will install maybe antivirus software, and maybe it will enable firewall. And then you can have another policy which will be applied only specifically to, let's say, .NET developers. So it will install maybe the latest .NET runtime VS Code for them to get started with. And maybe there's some, along with the previous profile, which will install antivirus software and set the firewalls, right? So it will first install the profile that is applicable for all the employees. And then if there is a .NET developer, it will apply the profile that is specific to that team or function. Similarly, there could be any level of cascading policies. You can have multiple policies defined for, let's say, finance needs certain kind of application that enables them to do finance auditing and stuff, right? And maybe there's a backend developer who just needs, who mostly works with a database. Maybe he need Mongo or SQL or so on and so forth, right? So you can actually customize it to any level. It will give you full flexibility for you to control who gets what kind of settings. And you can even get fine-grained control into what exact applications and how those applications are configured, so on and so forth. So yeah, you can totally get full control over who gets what.
Great. And the next one is actually quite an interesting one. And the question is, can I use Chef to manage endpoints without an MDM?
Yeah, that's a good question. In fact, we have few customers who actually do that. They exclusively use Chef to manage their fleet without any MDMs in the picture. But there are certain workflows where MDMs are really good at. For example, if you want to do zero-touch enrollment, if you want to enroll any devices, right? That's where MDMs shine. And specifically in the Apple world, MDM is the only way to do some of these things, right? So in that sense, MDMs play a critical role. But if you can figure out alternative way to get Chef client onto that endpoint, maybe you can do away with MDMs. But the general good practice that we've seen is, if you're trying to manage your Mac fleet, it's better to have an MDM in the picture, because of some things that Apple has locked down that you can't do outside of MDM, right? But whereas with Windows, you can be creative. You can do away with any of your existing MDM or UM tools and just use Chef. And for Linux specifically, right, you actually don't need any MDM tool. In fact, we've seen a lot of customers managing like huge Linux fleets exclusively with Chef. If you think about it, right, Chef has been built to do config management for servers, right? When I say server, I think a huge section of those servers are Linux servers, right? So we've been actually managing Linux machines from very long time, and the ecosystem that's built on that front is huge, and we have a lot of resources, a lot of abstractions that are available. So I think for Linux, you don't need any MDM. You'll be able to manage it without anything. But for Mac, yes, it's good to have MDM for things like initial enrollment, bootstrapping, and then remotely wiping and locking the devices. Whereas for Windows, it depends on your use case. If there are certain things that if you're too integrated into the Windows ecosystem, maybe there's always merit to have an MDM or a tool like SCCM or Intune. If not, then you can do away without them. Yep.
Sure. The next one is also fairly interesting, but so I'll ask the question. What are the typical use cases when Chef would be a good fit for us? I'd actually ask the person that asked the question to provide us a little more context about what they do. That will be more useful. But Nishchal, what are the good use cases where Chef is a good fit?
Yeah, if I put myself into an IT admin shoe, right? And if I'm in the market evaluating different tools, I would ask this question myself, right? And the way I would approach this is I would see why am I actually looking for new tools, right? I'll see what are the problems that I'm currently facing with the tool set that I have, right? And the reasons why I would opt Chef is, let's say if I'm running into this problem very often where I'm setting these configurations in endpoint management tools, but then it is not reflecting on the fleet, right? And that's one point, right? I'm setting the configurations, but I'm not able to get them to the desired state, right? And even if I get them to the desired state, for some reasons they are like deviating from that state, right? Either because of the end users getting creative and changing those settings, or maybe it's just some the operating system is getting corrupted for various reasons, right? This is software can break or can be broken. So that's one case. And the second is I just have too many tools, right? So realistically speaking, like I said, any decently sized organization has more than one tool to manage their fleet. If you have two operating systems, Mac and Windows, highly likely that you have two. And then on top of that, you have many other tools for vulnerability scanning, antivirus software, and so on and so forth. So I want to consolidate them and to reduce the number of tools that I have, and also streamline and standardize the processes, right? In that sense, I would probably opt for a tool that can help me in that direction. And the next thing is, I either have a lot of machines, like thousands and tens of thousands of machines, or my organization is growing at a pace where I'll eventually get to that state where I have like tens of thousands of machines, right? And I'm starting to hit some limitations with the current tool set I have, right? I have to do a lot of manual things, right? Every time I roll out some changes, a lot of things break and people would raise tickets and I have to go and firefight and fix them, right? In such cases, I would look for a tool that can help me automate some of that and would give me more confidence pushing out changes, right? So when I make a change using traditional tools in the UI, right, I have no way to test it unless I ship those changes to a device, a test device that's beside my desk, and test it on that. And even then, I'm not sure how it will act in the production or real user devices, right? So I'm always in the second thoughts whether this is going to succeed or this is going to break something. It doesn't give me enough confidence, right? That's where I would look for a tool which can help me test these changes in more automated way, and then push these changes to production with more confidence. Not just pushing these changes to the end user devices, but also having an ability to quickly undo the changes and track and audit the changes that have happened over the past, right? So for example, with a tool like Chef, right, when you push some changes onto your fleet, undoing those changes is as simple as rolling back the last commit, right? And then you'll be rest assured that your fleet will come back to the previous state. Whereas with traditional tools, you'll have to go and figure out what option have you changed in the UI. And even if you deploy any bash or shell scripts using MDM or UM solutions, you have to go and figure out what version worked, right? You have to maintain this versioning of these scripts outside of those tools. So which is like added headache. So if you want me to pick three, I would say first is scale. So if you're hitting the problem with scale, I would consider tools like Chef. And then the next is if I'm running into this problem of having too many tools at hand and I want to consolidate and have like a single control pane or pane of glass, I would look for a tool like Chef. And third is it's just getting too manual, right? It's like getting in the way, right? I'm not able to, uh, yeah, address the problems that my end users are having, right? That's when I'd like to automate some of this process. And finally, one last thing which I've not mentioned, which is compliance, right? This is another huge requirement that we've been hearing with the latest trends of work from home, that IT teams are more and more concerned about the compliance of their fleet, right? So if you are running into this issue where your security and compliance team is asking to prove the compliance of your fleet, right? What we have learned by speaking with our customers and some of the users is, before they adopted Chef, they had a very manual compliance review process where they have to prove the compliance to their compliance team, where they go and get different settings. They create huge Excel sheets with all the questions that their compliance team comes up with, and they'll have to go and verify if it's indeed in that state, right? It gets very manual, right? So this is where I would also consider a tool which can actually automate compliance monitoring as well. So these are
Sure.
the places where I think Chef fits good. But if you have a very small fleet, like hundreds of devices, and I think you'd be fine with any traditional management tools.
Sure. And thanks, Nishal, for summing that up really well, right? There's one more question. This one asks, do I need to have different cookbooks for managing different configurations, again, for different platforms? So lots of variables in that. But do you think that they need different cookbooks?
Yeah, it really depends on the use case. If the use case is pretty straightforward, then most likely that it can be handled using the abstractions that we provide. By abstractions, what I mean is Chef resources. But if you have any specific custom use case that is specific to your organization, then you have to write a little bit of if-else conditions that would handle differently for different operating systems. But for the most part, can be done using the same cookbook, right? You don't have to write it differently for different operating systems.
Great. So keep those questions coming in, and we'll try and answer them either on this webinar, or we'll reach out to you separately and try and provide those answers to you. But while we get to it, let's look at those poll questions and see what you thought of them, right? So the first one, what are the current problems that you're facing managing endpoints? I think by and large, managing scripts, OS patching, and a lot of manual steps. I think those seem to be like the predominant challenges. And that's, I think, what we also outlined at the start of the webinar. But Nishal, do you want to add, or Chaitra, do you want to add, to these challenges in terms of, are you seeing anything different? Do you see something more specific?
Yeah, managing scripts is, very obvious, and I think I've not really stressed a lot on this aspect, but maybe this is a good time to elaborate on that. So if you think about it, right, though I've been talking about how traditional solutions are more GUI driven, where you have to go and set configurations through UI, but to a large extent, every decently sized organization will resort to writing some kind of scripts to manage certain settings which are not possible through UI. There are just so many things that have to be managed that everything is not possible through UI, right? So they end up writing scripts. So the interesting thing about writing and managing the scripts is you end up having to write different scripts for different operating systems, right? Because you have to handle it specific way for Mac and Windows, and you have to probably call a different command line tool for on Windows versus Mac, and pass different parameters. There's just no uniform way of doing it across platforms, right? And so you first end up writing multiple scripts, right? Writing scripts itself is a problem. So for example, for even doing simple things, you might have end up writing a script that is like 20, 30 lines, right? Because you have to do everything from scratch. You can't build abstractions or utilities, right? You can do that, but it'll become more a headache to manage all those utilities across different scripts. So that's one problem. The second is managing them itself is a problem, which is so once you write these scripts, how do you deploy them to your fleet, right? You have to open the MDM or your EM solution, and you have to upload that script onto that MDM solution and then deploy it onto your fleet, right? But this brings in another problem of versioning those scripts, tracking the changes, and all that, right? Now you have to have this process outside of your tool. What happens if the script fails after it is pushed to your fleet? Now you have to undo it, and then you have to figure out what was the last script that we pushed, right? So the whole workflow is pretty broken, and it's very not very streamlined. So yeah, managing scripts is one of the recurring problems which we have seen with our customers. And in fact, Chef will solve this by providing a single layer, right? Instead of writing Bash and shell scripts, now you have to write Ruby. But like I said, Chef comes with Ruby DSL that will help you use the abstractions that are built into Chef, which will really help you get started faster. And instead of writing something in like 20-30 lines using Bash or shell scripts, you will be able to do it in like 5 or 10 lines. Again, I'm like oversimplifying it, depends on the use case, right? Since with Chef, you can actually set up proper CI/CD pipelines. So everything from end to end is a proper pipeline that can be completely automated, right from pushing the code to a source code repository, to testing it, to promoting it to production devices, right? Everything can be automated. And like I said, undoing and tracking the changes is as simple as looking at Git history or Git rollback, right? So yeah, managing scripts is indeed a problem when you have like multiple operating systems and increasing fleet size. And OS patching and application patching is pretty obvious, because as operating system vendors release new patches, they have to be updated. So same with any application. So this is like very crucial, one of the top things on top of any sysadmin's plate. And similarly, manual steps, I think we've talked a lot about this, right? I mean,
Yes.
if you look at it, managing end user machine is hard in itself, right? And it's getting even harder the minute more and more users are going remote, right? Which is like a norm at this point. So now there are more things to worry about. Now users are not connecting through VPN, and they are connecting from different places like coffee shops or ski resorts or their home, right? So it becomes much more challenging, and it increases the number of manual steps they would have to take. So yeah.
Great, sure. I'm cognizant of time, so I definitely do want to go through the other poll questions as well. Could we have the results of the next one, please? Right. Do you have any automation processes or tools in place? Well, that's split through the middle, right? So 50% saying we are completely automated. All our ID resource management is completely automated, and there's the other 50% that no, we're looking for an automation tool. So interesting, split right through the middle. Nishchal, any thoughts around helping the people that are looking for automation tools, at least directionally, in terms of what they should be looking at?
I actually have a comment for the folks who said they have already automated. So if you can share some insights into how you did that, that'll be great. Maybe we can share it with the other folks on the forum as well. But apart from that, yeah. So if you're looking for an automation tool, just give Chef Desktop a will, maybe a try. Maybe that can help you bridge the gaps that you have with your tools. So if you have any questions, you can drop a message. We'll get back to you and help you get started. So yeah.
I think I just add to that, right? And especially if you're looking at desktop automation, automation aside, just getting visibility across different operating systems is a challenge. And if you can find a tool that is going to be able to help you get that single pane of glass visibility across multiple operating systems, I think that's a good return on your investment, right? Not trying to do a hard pitch of desktop here, but definitely do see if there's something else that can stand up to that kind of a test. So I'll stop at that. Could we have maybe the next poll question, please? Right. Are you using Chef today or used it in the past? And a majority are not very familiar with Chef, which tells us, Nishchal, that we are not doing a great job. But would you wanna give these people at least a sense of what we do?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say we've only ventured into endpoint management space early last year, right? So I think we need some educating to do. I think there is some work to do on this front. But just to provide some context on who we are and what Chef does, like Chef's been like a forefront player in the DevOps world. and it has actually been one of the initial players who started the whole infrastructure as code moment, and it has helped in automating server infrastructure management, configuration management, and also automating compliance as well, right? So it's been doing that for like close to a decade or more than a decade. And then, like I said, we have seen some of our customers being creative and using the same tool set to manage their endpoints and automating some of the problems they had. And then we realized that we're getting more and more requests to formally create some offering around it. And then that's when we started working towards creating a product offering, and then we launched it early last year. And yeah, so Chef Desktop has been there for like a couple of years, and it's been used by really who's who of the tech world, who have like tens of thousands of machines, and they manage them with very small teams. So yeah, so I would say if you want to get started with Chef, visit our docs.chef.io page, and we also have self-paced tutorials that you can go through. So that's a good place to start with. And yeah, if you have any questions, you can reach out to us, and we'll be glad to help you.
And while we're saying that, right, just a couple of lines on that. Some of the largest social media sites use Chef. Some of the largest, cab automation and hiring services use Chef. Some of the largest entertainment networks in the world use Chef, right? So I'll leave it at that and let you draw your own conclusions. Feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be more than happy to run you through what we do at Chef and how we help these global organizations be more streamlined on their DevOps and ID side. I am mindful of the fact that we're 2 minutes over. If we haven't answered your questions, please reach out to us separately, and we'll definitely try and answer them. With that, thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Nishchal and Chaitra, for your time as well, and I'll hand it off to Raisa.
Thank you everyone for attending the webinar today. Thanks a lot, Sudeep, Nishchal, and Chaitra. It was really very informative. So if you all liked what you saw today, we encourage you to share the details and the presentation with your teammates and professional network. The on-demand version will be available soon, and we will email it to you as soon as it's ready. So with that, thank you again and have a great day. Bye, everyone.